Okay, it's March 25th. Is it today?
26th, I believe.
26th today, March 26th, 2004. Here with Bob Nelson out at his house outside Bayfield on Milligan Road. Well, Bob, as a kid, you were a kid growing up in the 50s here in Bayfield.
Mm-hmm.
What are your memories, and just from a kid's point of view, of the commercial fishing action that was going on in those days? I mean, your dad was still fishing.
Sure. I'll take you back to Rocky Island probably in the summer of 54, 55, 56, in those eras. My fondest recollection I can relate to you is listening to the oarlocks in the wooden skiff that my father had built by Olaf Edwards. And you could hear the oarlocks going with my dad and Tommy Thompson or Gilmore Young, whoever was with him, out to the buoy where the mermaid was on the buoy out there. And they'd come up to the buoy and I could hear the chains coming off the big boat and the little pond boat, the skiff there, being attached to the buoy system. And then I could hear the engine start on the mermaid, that old Cummins diesel. And I can hear the waves on the beach as he took off, and I can hear that engine growing fainter and fainter and fainter as it headed north by east outside of Brownstone Island. That's a memory I'll never forget, is that series of oarlocks going in the morning, the water lapping, and the seagulls in the morning too. And that's what started out as my earliest recollection of fishing in those days.
Right. So at that time you would be staying out on Rocky for...
Yeah, we virtually lived out there from the time school was out until about the 20th of August, somewhere. It was always around my birthday, and I can remember standing in the back of the Mermaid, which is his boat, and looking over the background as we left the island, and actually crying because you had to leave the island to go back to school, that type of thing. And Heidi was just a little girl then, but I can say goodbye to the island many times that way towards the end of August.
So that was really a paradise for kids then.
You never had it so good. We were in the water. I had 8 pair of blue jeans that were never dry. It was one of those things, and we were in the water and to the other side of the island and down to the sand point, picking raspberries, walking to the north end of the island, going up to visit the Hadlins, the Bensons, Mike Hendrickson, that whole group of people. Ole Olson was still on the island. Harvey, Laurie Nurse Sr. was there. Mr. Butler was still down the other end of the island. So we always had lots to do out there in the summertime.
So what other kids were out there then?
Boy, when I was there, we were basically Heidi and myself, and all the other commercial fishermen's children were up and gone. So we were pretty lonely kids on the island.
No kidding.
A lot during the summer. Yeah. We had our cousins came up and stuff like that, though, and they were out there, so wasn't a lot going on with other kids. The Erickson kids were still pretty young yet. I remember Sharon coming out there, and Brenda. Marty wasn't born then, but I can remember my cousin Yvonne carrying Sharon on her shoulders to the other side of the island and things like that. So and then Brenda Erickson was just a little bit older, and our Grandpa Mel was out there, and he used to call her Marble Eyes. She had these big, beautiful blue eyes as a kid, and she still does. But they used to call her Marble Eyes. That was her nickname.
And when do you recall the first time kind of being allowed to go out in the fishing boat?
One time when I was real young, and I don't know whether my dad took me out there just not to be a worker, but it was probably just in today's they call it a fatherly duty of daycare, but we went out to set nets outside of Outer Island that way. And I was, being a young kid, I was probably 5 or 6 years old, and my dad would be down below or in the boat, and the hired man was up there setting nets, and I used to sit on the roof back there, and I used to watch the nets go out the boat, and I could see the corks sinking as they went down like that, and I recall that very well. Then I got in a little trouble that day where I had a hammer up on the roof and saw a couple little nails that needed pounding in, and that wasn't one of the things that was allowed then because it would create a leak there, and got a little reprimand for that, and
Yeah.
and then and it would be asleep in the net box on the way home that day, so probably 5 or 6 years old when I did that.
Right. So the lake was really, and the islands were really in your blood from the time you were just a little child.
You never ever lose that love of that lake. It's always there. It's kind of when you're away from it, you wonder where it's at, what it's doing. And when you're on it, you have to respect it. But I mean, it overwhelms a person over a period of time, especially a lifetime. Get used to it.
Yeah. And what about the waterfront in Bayfield at that time? As a kid, you must have gone down there and.
Yeah, now there's a pool. In the old days, we had 2 swimming beaches, one down by Hulver Wrighton's. We used to play in his boatyard down there. I still have photos of the old boatyard because it felt so bad. I think it was when '82 when they tore the whole thing down. I shot some last photos of it because I wanted to remember that.
Yeah.
Something most kids will never see is that old boatyard and all the tools that Hulver Wrighton had, and it was just something else. We used to just go down there and play in his yard. He welcomed us. He let us fish off the end of his dock out there. There was just tons of little perch. We'd go perch fishing, and then we'd go swimming, and then we'd go up to the A&W root beer stand and have a couple of hot dogs. Then we go down to the...
Where was the A&W?
It's right where the pier is.
Oh, okay.
Listen to the songs of the early 60s in there, and through 68, and then we'd go back down to the lake down in front of the... at that time, it used to be the power company, and we'd have a fresh glass of water out of the Artesian well there that they've plugged that now, and that's not a drain off anymore.
Where was the Artesian well?
Well, it would be right in front of City Hall right now.
Mm-hmm.
So it was a spigot of water that came up about 2-3 feet out of the ground with an end on it, and I can still see Bill Hauser filling his milk cans and things like that to take water up on the hill. And
why'd they close it off?
well, I think it's when they built the new marina that they decided that was the end of that, and that used to be our whole swimming beach along that waterfront, and where the L is on the east dock there that goes out. There used to be a diving platform, and there was a whole series of rocks from the top. We used to dive off those rocks and into the lake, and there's a nice diving platform, and I caught more beautiful perch off of that dock than most people will catch in a lifetime. Little platform, probably 12 by 12. We used to dive off of that and swim in the harbor there, and then the marina came along, and then in the best interest of the community, and probably not the children,
Right.
we developed a marina that was a major addition to the community, which Dad was an integral part. So that changed a lot, though. It used to be a children's paradise down there, beautiful sand beach. Pebbles to the north side, rocky pebbles to the north side, pure sand right around the Coast Guard entrance, and we used to sit down there and really have a great time all the time. Then we go to the Coast Guard dock and we dive off the docks and the rocks out there and swim over to Ottawa Keene Fisheries, and then later on Badine Fisheries, and so the whole waterfront was just a kid's paradise to swim and fish, and there was no kayaking in those days or canoeing, but we were in the water at least half the days in the summertime when we were home.
Well, where were the commercial fishing boats docked then?
Bodine Fisheries came into town after they bought out Ottawa Keene, and they must have had probably 8 or 10 boats docked there. Right next to them was La Pointe Fisheries, which was bought by Morris Patan and Soren Peterson probably in the 62, 63, somewhere in there. And that's where Ernie LaPointe and Pitt had their operation, and then Morrison came in, and he utilized that whole dock. In the Coast Guard...
Was that the part that's filled in between Morris's and Bodine's? Was that open then? Was
that had a big box. It had a big warehouse there. I'll show you in a minute here. I've still got a photo of that community then. Had a big box operation house there in a storage building, and that burned down probably, I'm thinking, in the early 70s. It's a fire there. There used to be boats on that side of Morris's slip too. The Esther was there. Earl Russell was there with his boat, the Esther. Ted Neese had a boat in there. There was all kinds of boats in there. The Bobby was in there, type of thing. And from there, around the bend and heading north, there was a few fish boats along the east dock. The North Star was there. They used to keep the hack noise there, which was the DNR boat. In the wintertime, all the boats were tied up there, about 3 feet away from the dock. Then north of there was the old Booth establishment, and a number of boats.
Where the ferry is
Where
now.
the ferry landing is now. That was a real big complex. It had a big ice shed with a big slide system where they'd slide the ice up it in the wintertime, and they pack it and pack that ice with sawdust. And then there was, in front of that was like a little storage building, and next to that was the Quonset hut where they had all their lake trout. I can still see the inside of that where Soren Peterson used to sit over here, and the hired guys sat on the right hand side, and they stored all these fish in 125-pound boxes. You could see Albert Bonney in there. He was the only man in Bayfield that could lift him up over his shoulder singly like that. He was that powerful a man. That'd be Mike Bonney, as in Tim Bonney's dad. And there was a whole group of the gang that worked in there all the time. Lloyd Wickstein, Eli Hendrickson was there. Elvis Moe was the engineer on the Apostle Islands when I was a kid. All those guys worked there. They had 1, 2, 3 docks where all the boats were. They used to keep the Apostle Islands at one dock, and then the Nancy Lee and the Ickersund and a few other boats were on the south dock. And north of there, they had their skiffs and pond boats. And in the old days, they used to pull up all the boats on that beach where the kids now swim. That used to be a boatyard in the 30s and 40s and 20s, I guess.
You mean in front of the
Washington Avenue,
cooperage there?
where Washington Avenue dead ends in Lake Superior.
Right,
That used to be all boatyard.
right. And the Apostle Islands and the Egerson these were the boats that went out to the islands and picked up fish. Is that right?
The Egerson actually was a commercial fish boat.
That Booth owned and.
They didn't own the Egerson at that time, but they owned the Apostle Islands was their transport boat.
Right.
And they were the boat. The Apostle Islands was the boat that used to bring us supplies at Rocky Island. So we'd get all our milk and all our potatoes and ice and pop, and in return they'd pick up the fish daily out there at Rocky.
Every day.
Pretty much every day, yeah. Or every second day, something like that.
Was it depended on the weather and the.
Yeah, if they could get in there or not. I can still see the inside of the Apostle Islands, the big wheel, and I can see Eli Hendrickson running the boat and Lloyd Wickstein. I can still smell the fish in the boat, and the Collenberg. It had a 3-cylinder Collenberg, and I smell the oil and the fish that was in there. They'd weigh the fish on the spot, and I can still envision them backing out of the dock. We used to ride to the island on the Apostles once in a while. We used to come to town once in a while on a weekend, and one of my favorite memories of the Apostles was the big pop vat they had with just pure ice in it. And to this day, I'll never forget Old Smoothie root beer, because that's what we have, some of that fresh old smoothie as a 5 or 6 year old. It was just, just really the greatest thing you could have.
Heaven.
It was heaven. I mean, get on that boat and go for a ride and sit up on the top. And
Now, how big was the Apostle?
I think she's about 55 feet long, probably by 12 feet wide. And she had a front end. She was set up so that she was a burger boat built in Sturgeon Bay. She's 55. She was typical burger until you got to the pilot house in the front, and you could walk around the pilot house and stand on the deck in front, and you could watch the seagulls and stuff up on the front. So it wasn't the most common burger style.
Well, what's a burger style boat?
Well, Burger had a boat that they built. They had a pattern and a model, and they came out of Manitowoc, and they produced boats in those days, commercial fishing tugs were up and down the Great Lakes, Michigan, Ontario, Huron, Lake Superior, and they had a Superior boat, and they made many fish tugs. Now they're making the 150, 200 foot liners that the super wealthy in this country have access to.
Mm-hmm.
So they no longer commercial fish boats anymore.
Yeah. And who were some of the characters down that waterfront when you were a kid and you were kind of getting in the way and they were teasing you probably? And who were the guys?
Well, I remember great guys like Patty O'Day. Is everybody happy? That was his line. And he liked to nip a little bit and have a little fun. And he was my dad's age. They were in the same grade, but I knew him as a commercial fisherman. Russ Valentine, again, Elvis Moe, Lloyd Wickstein, Elmer Hendrickson, Eli Hendrickson, Mel Matson, Bob Van Duzer, just a wonderful bunch of old timers that worked in that fishery down at the water's edge.
Mm-hmm. So the boat would come in with the fish that they picked up at the islands, and then they'd clean them, and what would they do in that?
Oh, what would happen there was my dad was in on time. If he got in by 3 o'clock in the afternoon, they had all the fish dressed, stuff like that. And dressed means their viscera taken out of the inside and the gills are out and that type of thing. Those days they didn't have to tag them, but they're all brought out of my dad's commercial fishing boat, the Mermaid, set on the dock, slid into the Apostle Islands, where a box would be set on a scale. They'd put the exact measurement they wanted on there. They'd put ice in the bottom, set the measurement. They'd lay the lake trout in there. And when they got it right around 100 pounds or whatever, they'd say that's 100. They'd add a piece of paper, they'd mark it down, that's 100 pounds. They'd throw ice on that, move the box, put another new box on the scale, put ice on the bottom, and start the whole process over. Mm-hmm. I'll tell you, if my dad had 600, 700, 800 pounds, be 7, 8 boxes. They'd take those fish to Bayfield. In return, they'd give my dad ice in some of the other wood boxes that were there, mm-hmm. and we'd haul him into the ice shack on the dock there. That's where we also kept more Old Smoothie and Hams beer in there. I remember that was a popular beer in those days. There was always a 6-pack of Hams on the ice in there, mm-hmm. with the Old Smoothie.
And you had also said that as you got older, teenager, you'd work in the herring sheds.
Yeah.
I mean,
well,
tell me a little bit about that.
My life as a child was greatly different from my dad's in that I didn't need to go out and mend nets and slug nets and those type of things because he did that. I had to spend a lot of time on weekends where he and Dan Lindahl, he and Benny Carlson, he and whoever was working with him were seaming nets, that type of thing. So I spent hours and hours filling needles. I could fill needles with my eyes closed, anywhere it is right now. I used to do 100 a night, something like that.
So what is that? What is filling needles?
Well, there were the seaming needles when my dad and whoever's working with them were making new nets, and they needed that to tie the new nets on the meters, that type of thing. So they always needed a kid there to keep them filled, so they didn't have to stop the progress. I had the needle filled, and I remember just dreading that every night. The second thing I had to do was, and it was fun actually when I look back at it.
Now, did you get paid for this?
No, that was
your chore.
That was. I think I got a quarter a week allowance, and that was all part of it. Seriously, that was a quarter a week, and I had to mop out my mother's store, that type of thing, and then I had to go down and help him on. I got a quarter a week for this. Well, anyway, be that as it may, we also got into a situation where I got $1 an hour, and that would be in the early 60s, probably 59, 58, 59, 60, 61, 62, 63, 64, and into high school, where we'd pick fish, herring in the fall of the year. And I made really good there, and I was really proud of it. I could actually pick as fast as the old guys like Patty O'Day and whoever was in the bull gang in the herring shed with Dad. I could pick as fast as them, and he gave me $1 an hour. That time he was paying, I think, $17 a day for a 16-hour day for his hired men. So I was pretty proud. But it was every night. All the other kids were playing basketball, and I'd be down there picking fish and picking herring out of the net. So
And that was in the fall, right?
yeah, right around Thanksgiving.
Yeah.
That was what I did though was pretty consistent with a lot of kids did. They used to stop school in the fall of the year and let kids come downtown and pick herring so that they'd have Christmas money. Right. Virtually any kid that was in Bayfield schools at that time would leave the school to go downtown and pick herring in the fall of the year. Mm-hmm. And many of them did. I used to stand next to Bruce Peterson and Ann Peterson and Billy Stenson, the horse, and his brother Bobby, and all this little Norwegian kids always went down and picked fish. Mm-hmm. Where some of the other kids, they didn't do it, but
yeah,
we did darn good.
Imagine if that happened today.
There wouldn't be a kid who would ever skip school in their life if they had to go down there again. There wouldn't be one truancy in this district if they would pick fish all year if that was their other option.
Yeah. Well, the whole town rallied around the herring picking, right? And when the herring season, right?
Yeah, I remember we used to, when I get done picking, like for my dad, if he had a lighter lift, we'd go over to Hermie Johnson's shed. And that would be in the Lullaby shed over there where Lori Nurse now has the boathouse, that type of thing. Pick for him. Then we go to Mel Eric's and we always loved picking fish from Mel because Joyce would always make a big cake. And we always got cake and milk and stuff like that. And then we go back picking fish with those ugly, fishy smelling hands, oilers on, sleeves on, but we sure enjoyed that cake. So
where was Mel's?
At that particular time, he was picking fish over at Booth Fisheries, and my dad was at Ottawa Elkeen, and the Johnson boys were just one slip over near Hulver Wrighton's there, just on the opposite side of Hulver Wrighton's, and that's where he was at. So it was all walkable distance, and when 2 o'clock came around in the afternoon, you were down the dock looking for a boat to come in, and you got to pick fish just about whoever you wanted. But everybody had their favorites.
Yeah.
I was talking with Betty Johnson, who is now in the superintendent. She works for the Bayfield School District, and she was saying that my dad was one of the nicest guys she ever met because he was so nice to all the little kids, and they used to come down there from Red Cliff and pick fish, and so it involved not only Bayfield, but Red Cliff was very active in it, and all the kids from Catholic Hill would come down, and Swede Hill would come down, and it was a part of lost days that you probably never ever see again in this community.
No, you won't.
No, it's over. So
yeah,
but a wonderful experience.
Yeah. And so when you were doing that, you were making money, and you could save that up and have your own money.
Yeah. I had a piggy bank and a jar and an introduction to the bank account and those type of things. And introduction to capitalism there, so the hard way, the bottom up.
And do you remember as a teenager saying, well, I'm going to be a commercial fisherman too, just like my dad? Or what was your thinking then?
When I was a teenager, I never ever thought that I wanted to be a commercial fisherman.
Why not?
I loved the islands, I loved it. I just had such a taste for all that picking fish and the smell and stuff, and I looked at other kids having fun, and I thought, well, maybe this isn't really what I want to do. And my intent was to go on to school at the university level, and I did go to school in Eau Claire for a few years there. Mm-hmm. And
right out of high school?
Right out of high school. And then I wanted to do something different than fishing.
Bob, could we just stop for a second? Okay. So you went away to Eau Claire to college for a couple of years, you said. Was that right out of high school?
Yeah, that was in the fall of 1968. I was in Eau Claire.
Uh-huh. And what do you think, what were you taking up?
Well, at that point in time, I was just taking general studies. Mm-hmm. That was a real significant period in time because that was in the height of the Vietnam War. And, you were in college, you were 1A, 2S, whatever you were assigned, so the student was 2S. And it wasn't a nice option thinking about going to Vietnam. So a lot of kids were in school, taking advantage of that. And then in '69, I was there a semester and a half, and then I went to Los Angeles where I lived with Uncle Norman in the spring, for that semester period, and took my physical out there, and Uncle Sam decided I wasn't good enough for him, so I had some knee problems, severe knee problems from injuries, sports injuries and stuff like that, and there were so many kids that they were conscripting at that time. They just said, we don't. Thank you very much.
4F then.
4F after that, yeah.
Right. So then, did you come back to Bayfield?
Yeah. What was interesting is in the spring of '70, I came back from L.A. and my dad said to me, he says, you need to think about getting a job around here. And one of the things he mentioned to me was to talk to George King with the Wisconsin Department of Natural Resources. And there I got into working on the hack noise with Bud Badine, whose father was Ever Badine, and they owned some beautiful boats and stuff like that, commercial fish boats. And I went to work for the state of Wisconsin in a commercial fishery.
What's that noise?
Cat. You shut her down, or
Huh? I will.
should we go back to '70?
Yeah.
I came home in, is it on?
Yeah.
1970, I came back from a plane flight from LA International Airport into. Hang on a second here.
Okay. Now we're done wrangling the animals here.
Yeah, he's over to torture you now.
Yeah. So you came back, and you were talking about talking to the DNR.
Yeah, I was. My dad did mention to me that he said it was, if you're not going to school now, you need to be doing something. And he had a line on a job with the Department of Natural Resources, and he kind of asserted that I should go see George King, who was the fish manager here in Bayfield at that time. So I went to George, and he was a really great guy, nice personality, laughable guy. And he says, I do have a job for you with the Department of Natural Resources here. He says, we're doing some things. He said, one of which would be, to be working on the hack noise, which was a research vessel for DNR in those days, and still is as of this point in time. Mm-hmm. So I was assigned to work on the hack noise, and we did a whole pile of test sampling of nets throughout the Lake Superior end, from Saxon Harbor all the way to Duluth Harbor, that type of thing. And we also did the assessment sets in the Apostle Islands and the egg collecting for the lake trout facility here in Bayfield, the eggs, and we did all that work. So my first years were heavy duty commercial fishing type of stuff, but on a research vessel, working on. In fact, we took some of the first assessments of lake trout at Gull Island, Michigan Island.
Now, by assessments, what do you mean?
We'd run 4 boxes of nets that are approximately 1,000 feet long, and we hit the same spots every year. Mm-hmm. Same points, same ranges, same dead reckonings, that type of thing. And they were, like I say, at Sandcut, Michigan Island, Gull Island, Rocky Island, and then we did the whitefish assessments after that. In between, while we're doing the assessments on the reefs, we took eggs for the hatchery, and they in turn developed the eggs, that type of thing, and reintroduced these young fish back into Lake Superior. So, I did a lot of fishing in a year's time there too, so that was really a fun job.
Was it?
Oh, yeah. I mean, if you hadn't been on it, that's where I really kind of got back into this fishing thing. So I can remember the hack noise had a big gangway on the starboard side of the boat up there, and I can remember putting the lifter roller out in the pan that goes with it, and looking down over the edge at that blue water, and I thought, this is really a neat life that my grandfather had. And especially watching the stern ends of that water swishing from the propellers and stuff like that. All those things kind of made me think that this is really a neat way to spend a life after I'd come back from that California trip and stuff like that. And I decided to stay with DNR those years until about '75, when I went to work for Morris Patan.
Now, who else was on the hack knives with you?
There was, in those days, in the earliest days that I was there, and this was 1970, Bud Badine was the captain of the boat. There was a biologist, fisheries biologist, by the name of Brian Belanger, myself, and then there was a couple other young guys named Steve Terry. Jack Olson was on there at times. Had a guy by the name of Vic Goodlett who came from the hatchery in the fall of the year. David Hyde was also from the hatchery to help us take eggs. Pat Aschenbauer would be on there. He was taking the, we'd take scale samples of deceased fish and stuff, and he would do that. And Jim Ludak was on there from Ashland. We also had big shots from Madison that would come up. It'd be Bob Drees and Ron Poff, and there was a whole pile of, they always made their one trip a year to get seasick out there. And they were good guys too, though.
Uh-huh. And then this information was used to what end?
That was they compiled all the statistics on a yearly basis, and they added it to a list that went 20, 30 years, so that they could have comparative data of what was on Gull Island Reef, for instance, in 1970 as compared to 2004 like now. So they did this every year, and they would be able to look back and say the populations are up on the reef now, they're down on the reef. That was why they did that. And also the other assessments for whitefish and those station sets that we had that went, like I say, from Saxon Harbor. There's about 30 of them all the way to Duluth, Minnesota. And we hit them every year.
Right. And so how many years did you work for the DNR then?
From 1970 through 1975.
For 5 years on that, and then what?
And then I went to work for Morris Patan.
Uh-huh.
And
what was his boat?
At that time, he had a boat named the Gene Moore B, which is a commercial gillnet tug, and he had a couple of smaller pond net boats. We did a lot of pond net fishing, which are live entrapment nets. They're a thing of the past now too, since all the guys this day and age have gone to trap nets.
Right.
It was a lot of hard work. Pay was low, but the work was hard. That was the.
And where would these pond nets be set? What was your run?
In those days, we had one set in the bay down here. We had one set over by the marina, a 40-footer over by the marina in Madeline Island. We had two set by Emil Ericsson's. They were two 60-foot nets. Then we had one in the south.
Where was that, Emil Ericsson's?
It's Kapunki Bay on Madeline Island. There was two nets over there. They were deep nets, so we'd set them. There was a 58-foot net that we had on the south end of Bass Island, right on the reef there. We had two nets in Raspberry. We had one at Ironwood. We had one at Michigan Island. We set a deep net at Stockton. And I'm thinking that's about it for now. Yeah.
So would you make this circuit?
We do just about half a day. 6 or 7 nets a day is what we get, and we make the outside run. We had one nice net at South Twin too that was really a producer. So in those days we'd average between 1,500 to a ton a day to maybe 3,000 pounds someday of whitefish in those gill nets or in the pond nets back in those days.
So Morris wasn't setting any gill nets then; it was all pond nets.
He was in the summertime. We fish from about whenever the ice broke up, and one year it was as early as March 15th. We got out to set, and we'd fish gill nets until probably the end of April, and then we just stop everything and pull the pond net sticks in the lake, let them soak up for a week, do a little commercial fishing and the gill net fishing on the big boat then. Then we push the pile driver in the water right around then. You never push the pile driver in too early because you didn't want the waterlog on you.
Now, what do you mean by push the pile driver in?
Well, the pile driver was just basically a platform we worked off of to set the pond net sticks. There were 7 of them. There was 2 corner sticks and 3 outside sticks, and there was a couple sticks that were center in the back of the pot there, and we'd set those 7, and then we'd set the twine in them and things like that.
Now these sticks then would be driven into the bottom of the lake, right?
In some instances, they were driven. We used to rock them into position, back and forth on a platform up on top of the driver, so we had good angles up there. And in other instances, like at Anderson's Point, we used to blow them in that sand. So we'd had a pump on the boat, and we had a long hose that went down 40 feet with a nozzle on it. And we'd start that pump, and we'd push the sand aside, and we'd rock those big stakes right down in the sand there, and they'd stay there forever. And then we had to run anchor lines, or if the anchor lines were already in a certain spot, then we had to just make adjustments. And
so then these pond nets are hooked to these poles that you drive in. So how does that work?
Well,
describe how that works.
The pond net, as I say, has 7 sets of poles that are all held in place by anchor lines. Once the poles are in place, what you need to do is take your smaller boat and go inside the pot and go up to the tunnel sticks. These tunnel sticks were the 2 inside sticks on the back side of it, and they had cables on them that went all the way to the bottom. The pots and the hearts, the pot would be on the outside of the stick, on the inside would be the heart.
Now describe what a pot and a heart is.
A pot is the place where you actually captured the fish. The heart was a set of net, below the water, from the water's edge down to the bottom, where the fish circled and moved into a set of tunnels that were in the pot. Once the fish were in the pot, they virtually couldn't escape. Mm-hmm. Anyway, to set the pot, you had to basically take some staples out of the oak logs that were used to be the tunnel sticks. The pots had a set of rings tied to a rope that went 40 feet down, and you just set those rings on there, restapled it, put the other set of rings on it, restapled that. That would be the spot where the tunnel would be, between those 2 sticks. Mm-hmm. Down it would go. We'd go out to the outside ends. We'd tie the corners on the inside. We'd tie the corner on the other side. We moved to the outside, and the corners had block and tackles that we had above water, but we'd run a line through them and drop them to the bottom, tied to the bottoms of the pot. And when you pull those tight, the whole pot stretched out, and the pots were basically 40 feet by 60 feet deep, 40 feet deep, that type of thing. So that would stretch it out, and that would make for a nice tight fit. And then we go back and tie the tunnel lines up on the king stick, which is the middle outside stick. At that point in time, we'd pull that tight. That would make sure that the pot, all the fish could enter with no net in the way, that type of thing. Mm-hmm. Once we got that pot in place, we go to the other side of the tunnel sticks, and we put the hearts on. Same procedure. Pull off the cable. Take the rings all the way, all of them. There's probably 15 or 20 of them at X amount of feet apart. Insert them on there. Staple it back up. Do the other side the same way. Drop them all the way to the bottom. Then what I would do is they would, at that point in time, the hearts would start to come off the back of the pond boat, and they would turn the boat towards shore and just drop the stuff in the water as tight as they could, run their lead to shore. Then I would be working the other little boat, and I would grab onto the bobbers where the anchors are on them, and I'd stretch them out and run anchors to make them nice and tight, so that they too were pulled out and real tight. And then we'd make final adjustments before then. The whole process of putting a set of sticks in, a set of hearts and lead, with all the anchors and the buoys associated, and the pot, took about 8-hour day.
Is that all?
Yep.
It sounds like a lot of work.
About 4 hours each, but you got to remember there's a travel time in between.
Right.
It could be 2-3 hours driving, pulling the driver. We'd have to go to a different island, sometime to pick up sticks. If we left them off there the night before, we'd have to drag them from Bayfield So, a lot of the time was just spent behind a wheel getting to the spot. And you needed pretty nice calm weather, which May usually had, so that you get that stuff set, because you remember you're working on a pile driver setting the sticks. If it's blowing, there's waves coming over the top of that and stuff is in the lake, and then then the pile driver wants to twist around on you, and it just becomes pretty frantic actually. Then we
Now,
just
are there just two of you doing this?
that time there was myself and Dean Halverson and Morris Patan.
Three of you.
Yep. Afterwards, Dwayne Peterson was there, and Mark Simmons, and I think that was about it when I worked with Morris for those 7 years.
And was it always on that same boat?
Same thing.
Yeah.
Yep. There was a little wood pond boat built by Olaf Edwards. Beautiful little boat. It had a little Chrysler Crown engine in it. I'd run that one, and then the other steel boat that Morris ran with Dean on it or something like that was called a Deanne. He bought that from Reuben Nelson a few years before that, and that's what they used. We used all summer long to haul fish on that. That had a Nordberg engine in it.
And so, in making a circuit, how much fish could you get? What was an average?
I want to say in those days probably 20, 25 boxes a day. They were 90-pound boxes. There's probably anywhere from 2,000 pounds to, on good days, over 3,000 pounds of whitefish.
Right.
And Dean and I always had them dressed by the time we got to Bayfield. So
It's a lot of fish to dress.
yeah, we could move a knife in those days. And they had to be iced down, and then they'd be hauled back into the shed. And Morris had a guy by the name of Gayhard Charlo working for him. I don't know if you remember him or not. You might say we called him. That was his his nickname, because that's what he said. And we used to be inside the shed there, weighing fish after that, and boxing fish and shipping fish. So the day never ended.
Now, where was the fish house?
That was LaPointe Brothers Fish House. It would be right next to the Coast Guard station. It was a green fish house in those days. I think it still is. And that's where we did all that work.
Right. And so you really learned by doing on this stuff.
Yeah, it was hands-on training all the way. That's the way they taught you. There's no University of Commercial Fishing around here, but they taught you a good trade that. The industry's to the point now where there's not too many kids need that trade anymore.
Yeah.
But it's it was $300 a week I could make back in the 70s, and that was
pretty good.
Yeah, it was. But I mean, that was for a 60-hour week, 70-hour week. I was paid $5 an hour. That's what it was, and you multiply that out by how many hours you put in. They're almost always 12-hour days. They were 6 to 7 days a week.
No overtime.
No overtime then. Yeah.
And how was it to work with Morris and during those years?
Morris is actually a pretty jovial guy. He was a good guy, but he was a driver. He demanded your time. He didn't have much time for anything else. He wanted your time. He would not let it go, and he just had you there all the time if he had his way. But we were rebellious too, and we just take off sometimes. The heck with him, you know what I mean? And he'd get pretty upset. There's money to be made.
Yeah.
And we liked to party, and we had a lot of fun too. So.
Now, before you went out, did you guys gather anywhere early in the morning? For coffee or whatever?
Yeah, we always went to Grunky's for breakfast in the morning. Vic Grunky had a buck breakfast for the locals, which were always last night's potatoes, fresh toast, and eggs and stuff like that, all for $1. And when anybody else came in, it was $2 or $3.
Now, what time of morning was this?
Be there 4:30, 5 o'clock every morning.
Yeah.
Vic would be up under any condition. He was always open by then. I remember Jimmy Frostman, Jimmy Earth, and myself all having breakfast in there. A lot of the guys ate there in those days.
Yeah.
Vic Grunke was a wonderful guy. He carried a lot of skeletons in his closet. He probably liked to, hit her up a little bit, but he was basically, to us guys, he was just the greatest guy ever. Full of fun. Always had a laugh in the morning. Always made sure Frostman had cigars. Buttermilk for Bucky Batan a lot, and and those type of things.
So then you'd all head out in your own boats out to the lake, and then when you came back at the end of the day, would you gather anywhere? Would you get together and have a drink or beer?
Well, sure. There was probably Thursday through Sundays where we'd always met every night and had some beers and often stayed fairly late. You know what I mean?
Now where was that?
We'd go to at that time it was the Juniors. It's now Maggie's. We spent a lot of time there. It was Bates Bar was in town, Troller's Inn, the Bayfield Inn. We used to go to Sunday school at Onion River. That was Dolly Zifko's place out there. And it's on the corner where the Onion River is. There's a home there now. Somebody lives there.
That was a bar, restaurant?
Yeah, they served, it was a beer bar at first, and we were 18 in those days. You had to be 18 to drink beer, but you had to be 21 to drink any hard stuff, and we were in our, 18s and 21, a little bit later you could drink hard liquor out there. We used to go out to Pitla Points in Red Cliff and sit on wood boxes out there and drink that cold beer out of that out of the ice coolers, and some of the best, beer you'd ever have in your life on a hot day.
Yeah.
And, so we were at Pitts, and we used to go out to Skippy Allen's in those days and have a good time out there. And Petty Cash.
Yeah.
I don't even know if it was called that then. Just go down to Washburn. We had a lot of friends in Washburn and hit the area. Port Wing, we used to
So when did you guys sleep?
I'll tell you, there's many days where it was 2 o'clock in the morning, we get home, and 5 o'clock we're on the lake. I mean, when you're young, you get away with that. I couldn't even begin to think of doing that now. I'd be dead.
Yeah.
And we were tough, and we could work hard too. It was just no let up. And we were kind of proud of the fact that we were that tough, I think.
Now, who were the guys your age, besides Deanie?
Kenny Johnson worked for Badeen's over there. He's a couple of years older than me, and he, fish smelt with Laurie Nurse. He also worked in the bull gang for Roger Badeen, Dick Badeen. Jeff Badeen was pretty young then. He wasn't really too much in the business, so he was over there. There was a kid by the name of Kevin Cunningham from Adeline Island now, and there's a whole pile of Northland College kids that worked there those days. And then there weren't so many young guys commercial fishing my age, though, and nobody was doing it. Everybody suspected it would be a dead end future, and they were right. So there weren't many guys my age fishing.
Because this was the 70s, and things kind of went to hell in the 60s, didn't they?
Yeah. No. Actually, those 70s were pretty bountiful for the commercial fishery around here.
Is that right?
Yeah. I mean, there was never a lack of fish. There was a lot of fish to be caught. I mean, even in the gillnets in the fall of the year, spring of the year, it was, we'd 1,800 pounds a day in those days too, in the gillnets. So it was good fishing. There weren't quite as many lake trout as prior to that, but there was still a lot of lake trout on the rebound then too in the 60s and 70s that I remember.
Right.
Lots of them. I remember at Gull Island when I was fishing with the state of Wisconsin in the early 70s, we'd have 300 or 400 fish on a 4-box gang of nets at Michigan Island and at Gull Island. So my dad said he'd never ever seen fish like that when he was young fishing. Never saw a lake trout like that on the reef. So there was a heck of a lot of lake trout coming back at that point in time. And that's mainly because the Department of Natural Resources did a good job of managing prior to that. They established some no fishing zones and made federal refuges out of them, and there was quite a few lake trout starting to make a comeback.
And also there were a lot less fishermen by then.
Yeah, right? I think at the end there was 25 commercial fishermen, and I think there were 13 men fishing out of Red Cliff. Right now I heard it's down to 20 commercial licenses, that type of thing. So, and that went from a population prior of I think my dad mentioned the other day about maybe 100 fishermen in the whole area that held full-time or part-time fishing licenses down to lower numbers like that. So, you know, the resource was not hammered too hard like it was in the past.
But there was a common wisdom. I mean, the people said that it had been overfished and there wasn't enough fish anymore. Was that not the case? I mean, what you're saying implies that there was plenty of
Prior
fish.
to that, like when Ivor Badine, and my dad was telling me, like in the early 60s, which I wasn't really too much of on the lake type of thing, there was a lack of lake trout. They would set 15 box gangs on the south shore, 8 rows of them, wind up with 150 pounds a day, you know, that type of thing. So there was a period in there where there were no, they weren't doing well commercially in the gill nets. However, in the pond nets, I don't know where those lake trout came from, but I'll tell you, in the 70s, it was nothing. I mean, we would see commonly down the bay down here, a minimum 100 pounds, 200 pounds of lake trout daily in there, that type of thing. And the raspberry net, the deep net at Raspberry, the 65-footer we had there, you would see lots of lake trout there. You get in the shallower nets in the summertime, you wouldn't see much lake trout. And then when we fished in the fall, boy, they came out of the water like pork links. Had up at Bear Island, York Island, Sand Island, that way. You can get on those reefs up there in the spring, fall, between Brownstone and Outer Island, in 16 to 25 fathom, 30 fathom there, 40 fathom. You'd see lots of lake trout in there in the fall. Right after the season opened up in December, we were fishing there. So you'd see a lot of fish and lake trout. Beautiful fish that you never saw, you know, the rest of the year. I don't know where they came from, but they were there. Part of the problem in the past was overfishing. There was, to some degree, the lamprey did a lot of damage too.
Right.
All in all, the Department of Natural Resources has done a really good job of reintroducing the lake trout stocks back into the lake. I mean, if it weren't for them, they could be really decimated by now. So,
Now go through the season of fishing. In the spring, you said you would get out in the lake and you'd go after whitefish with gill nets, right?
yeah.
So why don't you go through the various seasons?
Well, what happened is, we'll start at the spring of the year, and generally when the first ice went out between the middle of March, the Ides of March, we called it, when we lost had a really bad spring that year with the wind and stuff and ice, to the second week of April, we'd get out. We'd fish commercial gill nets. We'd fish for herring. We'd fish for chubs. Fish gill nets, the 4.5-inch stuff for whitefish.
4.5-inch meaning?
The mesh size was size. The herring nets were 2 3/4, 3-inch. The chubs was 2 9/16, 2.5, something like that. Fished even a few menominee on the beach, you know, that type of thing.
What is that?
They're just a different species of, and they're in the whitefish family, but they're called menominee. And there's obviously the whitefish is the big marketable fish, but that's a subspecies of whitefish, I guess. So we'd fish them until the spring of the year when we got into the pond nets, and that, like I said before, that would start right around May. They kind of commingle. They kind of mesh together the gill nets, and then we putz a little bit with the pond net sticks. Like I said, we put them in the water, let them soak up so they're easier to handle, that type of thing. And we fish pond nets until right around the 1st of September. We'd have all the nets out by the 1st of September, maybe at the latest the middle of September. Start to fish a few gill nets right around that time to keep the money rolling. And
What were you after then? Still whitefish?
whitefish, that type of thing.
And some lake trout?
Yeah. I remember in September, Morris used to do some assessment fishing on the east side of Michigan Island and also the north end of Madeline up there, gill nets for the state of Wisconsin. So we'd putz with that a little bit, about 7 lifts, those type of things. From there, that would stop until the close season started right around the 1st of October. And until December, we just worked on getting sticks for next year in the woods. Mm-hmm. And we'd fish from the 1st of December until freeze up, which is usually right around Christmas. Stop then, the boats would be pulled up, set aside, that type of thing. And from there, we would go into a little lull where we'd wait for the ice to form. Then we spend time on the ice fishing commercially through the ice. So we'd set, gill nets through the ice in the wintertime until, that period in time where we could go put the boat again.
Now, in that time, was there still a decent herring season in November, or was that over?
Yeah, it was decent. Yeah, we used to. Yeah, in November there was that herring season, and we'd go from probably the 1st of November until maybe a week or two into December, and it was good fishing. Not as good as it is now, though.
Is that right?
Yeah, it's much better now. I was on the lake this fall with Dean Halverson, and they were getting 4,000 pounds a day and 2 boxes of nets, and we'd probably get that maybe on 8 boxes of nets, and we'd let our nets go 2 or 3 nights, in those days. So at least where we're at up around Cornucopia, the fishing was much better than it was at Sand Island and Bear Island where we used to fish in those days.
Now, where did Morris sell his fish?
His whitefish went to Chicago. He'd had a supplement market where he filleted whitefish around here and sold to the restaurants and stuff in this area. But the greater majority of his fish went to Fulton Street in Chicago, Illinois. There was a local Jewish market down there that he dealt with. I remember a guy's name was Rocky. He always called Rocky on the phone for prices. That type of thing, and that was part of the day's work, as we boxed them up in those cardboard boxes that had a paraffin type of solution over the outside. Off they'd go to Chicago, and
how would they get shipped there?
By truck. That period of time, Ray Langhammer was running fish for us down there. Dean Halverson would run some fish down. Lenny Peterson was a native fisherman up north. Sent fish down on that route. Sometimes all the fish went through our own trucks, though, or Morris's trucks in those days. Right.
And so he wouldn't sell to Bodines then.
He would.
He would.
Yeah, if in a pinch when he needed to get rid of fish, we'd bring some over. But generally speaking, most of it went to Fulton Street.
Because he got a better price that way.
Yeah, that was what I understood.
Eliminate the middleman.
Yeah, but we were getting 25 and 45 cents a pound for whitefish in the summertime, so it wasn't much money at all.
Yeah, that's right.
But another nickel a pound on 2,000 pounds added up in the summertime, and I don't know how the mathematics came out on the fuels and drivers and stuff, but he seemed to think that was the better route to go.
Mm-hmm. Would he also sell to the local restaurants and stuff like he does now?
Yeah. Yeah, he had a major businesses that he supplied. Mm-hmm. And it was like a lot of fish went to Madeline Island, the beach club over there. Mm-hmm. The pub on the island used to get his fish, and the Bayfield Inn. I think he sold somewhat to Maggie's in the earlier days in Fisherman's Cove, that type of thing.
Which is still going on today.
Yeah, he's still active. When I first worked with him, he was 54 years old, right around my age, and now he's over 80. So,
and still,
he's still pretty productive. He likes to keep his hands in on the business, and he putzes with that, and I think he's seaming nets and keeps pretty active.
So who works with him now?
His grandson Craig Hoopman and he are partners. Where Morris owns the retail business, has some vested interest in the commercial fishing business, but Craig owns surprisingly, he bought back the boat, the Gene Moore B, that Morris had sold in the early '90s. There, that boat went to Illinois, was owned by somebody that probably disreputable, you know, motive, and I think it was owned by the hoods down there and the gangsters. They rebuilt the boat and they did a lot of stuff to it, and they were fishing a little bit in Lake Michigan. Then the last thing the boat was, before it came home from, but when Craig brought it home, that boat was in the Illinois River down there, just, you know, not being used much. And so Craig went down and wanted to buy that old boat that he remembered, the steel boat. It was 55 feet long. It's a Peterson boat. Now it went from a 3-cylinder Collenberg to a Cummins diesel in it with all the bells and whistles on it. He brought it home. And so he's now, the Gene Moore B is the boat that I remember is now the Eleanor B. And he named it after Morris's wife, Eleanor, in out of respect to her.
I see.
So that's what the boat he's fishing now, and it's a beautiful boat.
And who was the Gene Moore B?
Gene is short for Jeanette and Maureen, who were Morris's daughters.
Oh, okay.
So
Oh, we're out of tape. On this one. Take. Yeah.
oh Christ, Jack, you get down now. Yeah, you lay down. You lay down. You lay down. Get down. Let's get down. Get down. Down.
Okay, we're rolling.
On November 11th, 1975, probably was one of the more interesting days commercial fishing that anybody could probably ever experience. The day set out to be a real normal day. It was a beautiful, bright, sunshiny day, nice crisp winds, that type of thing. We're out fishing herring or gillnets or something. We decided, Morris had decided that in the Gene Moore B, he and Deanie were talking about setting some herring nets on the north end of Otter Island. And what they brought along was 6 boxes, about 6,000 feet of 2 3/4 inch net, and we figured there might be a few herring up on the rocks on the north side by the light. Well, we get there about 5 o'clock in the evening, and we got the nets set, and all of a sudden, we've been hearing all day long about this major weather that was coming. Heard it on the radio, and well, we said we'll probably get away with it. We'll get away with it. And so we set the nets, and I can still see that on the exhaust pipes of a Collenberg. If you've ever been around them, they blow. They're half fuel and they're half air when they come out of there. And then the Collenberg was blowing donuts. Kapunk, kapunk, kapunk. With every kapunk comes a little donut up in the air. And I was noticing that I was on the roof of the boat, tying on buoys and stuff like that, and these donuts were starting to, blow away very quickly. And I got back down on the boat, and I looked at Deanie. He says, "Say, Nels," he says, "you're never going to see these nets again." So he predicted. That was about 5:30 in the evening when we were done with that. We started the boat around the north end of Outer Island, heading back towards Bayfield, and all of a sudden you could hear the wind coming out of the east and the north there. All of a sudden, it's going whoosh, 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 really getting rough. We headed toward the north end of the island and swung towards Bayfield, which would be about south-southeast down there towards the north end of Anderson's Point, which is about 10 miles from where we're at. By the time we got to Anderson's Point, the Gene Moore B, which is almost a 50-ton boat, 55 feet long, 52 feet long, around an island, we were like a surfboard on some of the seas that were there. That was the same day that the Edmund Fitzgerald went down off of Whitefish Point. So, with that in mind, we got back to town. We went home. We said we got to get out there the next day and try and get those nets. We left Bayfield early in the morning, 5:30, 6 o'clock in the morning. Lenny Peterson was ahead of us. The Hadland boys were ahead of us. In the Vagabond, Lenny was in the Wolverine 2. Jimmy Erickson was in the Cindy 2. Everybody who had nets in the lake had to get out there and try and get them back. Well, we got up as far as the north end of Wilson Island, and the Wolverine 2, which was just ahead of us, would go behind one wave and we go down the other, and all you could see was the antenna for the radio receiver above her. So we'd lost sight of the boat, and that's only like 150 feet ahead of you. So the waves were really seriously big that day. We went up the west side of Outer Island to try and get those nets, and when we got to Outer Island, the outside end of the nets were in about 60 feet of water. We picked up the buoy, and that was all she wrote. That wind blew for another 2 days after that, and that's all we got out of that 6,000 feet of net that day was one buoy, and the rest is nothing but a lead and net pile on the reef up there. So that was kind of an interesting story that tied into one of the epic tales of the sinking of the Edmund Fitzgerald, and we were on the lake the same night.
Yeah, because that went down at night, didn't it?
Yeah, well, she was further down the lake.
Yeah.
So.
Well, I'm surprised you guys got out there the next day.
Well, we were. Those boats, those steel fish boats were tough. Well, we took the leeward side of the islands, but once we got in the channels out there, that's where you paid for it, and that sea. I can remember the bay down here in Bayfield was blood red. It from blowing and it just churned the waters up all over the place, and there was a lot of current after that. It was a system where 3 sets of lows converged right around Whitefish Point. We weren't in that major low down there, but we were on the perimeters of it. And it's kind of a neat story to tell other people that we were on the lake the same day the Fitz went down.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. Were there some other close calls that you remember that weather was pretty damn bad and you were out there?
One of the things we never did was turn around. Not with Morris. So once you left the dock, you did what you're supposed to do, and you got your nets and you went home. He was tough. He wouldn't quit, and you got to give him a lot of credit. He never left a net in the lake. He was about as clean as you could ever get. He never left anything behind, unless he got into a situation like that where.
Right.
But as far as serious situations go, I think we probably could have sunk the small pond boat one time, where we were lifting twine in the fall of the year. Lifting twine was the pond nets, or pulling them out. We have 3 or 4 of those pond nets on the back of that little boat, and we got into some tough water between Oak Island and the mainland there, where we took one over the top, and I was about ready to wave bye-bye to Deanie. So, fill the boat up, and fortunately it didn't go down the hold at all, but we would have just probably sunk right down out of sight. That's the only time that I can remember being dangerous. Been out in some nasty weather though. I get a lot of garbage in the nets. We made mistakes where that year we went out in March 15th, Ides of March. We set I don't know how many boxes of nets in areas where we shouldn't set them, which is in that water between Hardwood and Bear Island and Rocky and Bear Island, and all these holes that are notorious for having trees and tree limbs and moss and crap on bottom. We set down those holes, and we got a 3-day northeaster out of that deal. We were picking crap out of nets all spring long. We must have 20 boxes of gill nets in, and they're all loaded right to the hilt with stuff like that. So, those mistakes are made fairly often by commercial fishermen. Wanted to get out, wanted to make some money, got out too early. Mother Nature takes over.
Right.
There you are.
Well, like when you guys would meet at Grunky's early in the morning, and it was an iffy day, would you all kind of talk it over, and it was every man for himself kind of thing?
Yeah, everybody, depending upon where you were going to lift nets. I mean, you could be on the west side of an island with some gill nets, and the wind's blowing out of the east or something. You're fine. So everybody, and say, where are you set? And we knew where they were set. And like Jimmy Frostman was always outside of Michigan Island that way, and that's real tough country. And he was fishing chubs and herring out there. And he fished some gillnets in the islands too, but he'd head that way. And anytime you get north wind out there, or south, anywhere from north to south southeast, you're wide open.
Yeah.
And then the rest of us, it depends on where you were. You just go do your job, get them lifted.
Figuring that you'd make it back.
Oh yeah, there was never any second thoughts about not ever making it back. It was just how much do you want to put up with that day. I mean,
Right.
you could be lifting nets and the waves are breaking over the bow of the boat, and you're trying to hang on down for dear life, down below, pick fish, clear nets, whatever you need to do down there. Boxes sliding all over the place, net boxes sliding all over the place. You can literally walk on the walls and walk, fairly parallel. Those boats would roll a lot. They'd dip and they'd slide and they'd roll, but they're really good boats. They're steel, and you didn't ever have to worry about not being safe that way. But just how much rolling could you take all day long? And
Yeah.
guys are really tired. I think after a week of work out there, people don't even know what tired is. I mean, it is really physically hard work.
Yeah.
It's endless hours on your feet, lifting. Everything weighed 100 pounds or more. So you need to be strong, or have somebody strong to help you there.
Mm-hmm.
And it was a constant workout all day long.
Yeah, it's hard to imagine what it takes.
Yeah, young people nowadays, I don't know if they know what hard physical work is. They don't know what it takes to commit to a hard day of that. They put in as many hours a day as we do, or did in those days, but they did not have that physicalness to it. A lot of kids, maybe farm kids do now and things like that. There's a few out there, but it was nothing like that in the commercial fishing. It was just from the time you left the dock till the time you got home, to the time you got home at night to your real home, because you worked from 5 in the morning till 5, 6, 7, 8 o'clock at night, sometimes 10 o'clock. I remember starting the light plants on those boats. 9 o'clock at night, we were still outside of Anderson's Point, coming home. We brought the boat up to Port Wing in the spring of the year, set in the islands. I remember outside of Port Wing in Cornucopia, there'd be a quarter mile of ice up to the beach. 6 hours later, you'd get through the ice and into the harbor, because that stuff was jam-packed right to the bottom, and we'd sit out there and pound away at it. We left Outer Island at 4 o'clock, and we got into Cornucopia about 8:30 at night, and we weren't tied up the dock till 2 in the morning.
Whoa.
And that's the way it was. And we lifted that day outside of Outer, fat nets outside of Outer, and we lifted 10 boxes out there and said, well, this will be an easy day, and we'll head right back to Port Wing, which is about a 6-hour run, 5-hour run. Another 3-4 hours, and we're pounding ice out there to get into the harbor. You had to hang on to the wheel in there for dear life, because those big cakes would get under the rudder back there, and when the propeller shoved that cake into the rudder, it would take that wheel and spin it on you like you wouldn't believe, and almost break your arm if you weren't hanging on. So you had to be at the top of your game from the time you left in the morning till the time you got there. We used to stay in the ice in the spring of the year. That was kind of a neat experience. We'd load up the boat with nets and food and be gone for a week. Stay right in the boat. Many times we've been at the south end of Cat Island, walking ashore. We'd run the boat up in the ice, take a chisel, plant an anchor in the ice so we wouldn't go drifting away at night, and stay there till the next day. We'd go lifting nets and stuff like that.
So would you sleep in the boat, or?
Yeah, that was another experience, I'll tell you. The clanking of aluminum corks, every little thing that you can hear out there, you hear trying to go to bed at night. We had an old Sunbeam, a big Sunbeam heating unit in the boat. The boat was not insulated, so we go to bed at night around 9 or 10, pull out a cot and a sleeping bag. Morris would sleep up in the pilot house where it was always warm. He had a big pull-out bed up there, big spot where he could lay down. Anyway, it was always warm up there. You go to bed at night, you stoke the fire. By midnight, you're up stoking it again. It'd be so cold in the back of the boat, you could hardly stand it.
Now, what were you burning in the stove?
Coal.
Coal.
So we throw in a 5-gallon pail full of coal every time.
Mm-hmm.
And that would hold us, get nice heat in there again. And the draft, the boat was half open all the time anyway. There was draft going here and there. And but that was something else. Be gone for a week. Staying in there like that. It was, as I look back, though, were fun times. That I wouldn't want to do again. It's
Yeah.
1 or 2 nights of that's fun, but not a week anymore. And,
Yeah.
you know.
Well, as you said, you were young.
Yeah. Yeah, we used to fish fats out there then, outside of Alder Island. We had a gang of those nets in. We had 10 or 12 boxes of gill nets in. We'd set some chub nets. We were just overextended. It was, and there's never enough, I mean, we always had to have the max of everything in the lake. And that's what causes those long hours. And you get behind lifting and stuff like that because of the weather. And you get dirt in the nets. And it just made the job grueling. And it wasn't any fun at all. It was just a lot of serious hard work. Sore hands, cuts in your hands. You just never got done working out there.
Yeah. And didn't get paid a hell of a lot for the fish.
$5 an hour. That's what it was.
But I mean, even when you brought the fish in,
Yeah. Yeah, those fish in those days were, I don't know, in the spring of the year they got as high as $1.25 a pound. So I mean, those were the the holidays that the Jewish people seemed to pay more for fish then. So they took advantage of that. But after Easter, everything dropped. So you need to get out there in Lent and that area, and get as much as you could, as quick as you could, because then the price would drop down about 75, and then it'd be down to 45, and in the summertime it'd be down to about 25 cents a pound. Lake trout was about the same thing. The only way they made any money on lake trout was fillet them, and they used to get $2 a pound filleted, and then they sold those to the restaurants. So. But that was the fillet fish. So in the round, you lose a third of the fish if you had the viscera and the backbone and the head on it. So it was, the price of fish wasn't good no matter what.
and what was an average size fish, let's say for a whitefish?
2.5 pounds.
So you end up with something that's under 2 pounds.
Yeah.
Cleaned.
If the fillets weigh 3/4 of a pound a piece.
So that's all you get, under a pound then.
Yeah.
And that's what you're selling.
Well, you get 2 fillets that weigh about 3/4 of a pound a piece on a 2.5 pound fish.
So you got 1.5 pounds at, let's say if it's even $1,
Yeah.
a pound.
Herring was less. I don't know. But I want to think they were probably 45-50 cents a pound in those days. Ton a day, so it'd be $1,000 a day that we'd take in. But we burned $100-200 worth of fuel. That old Collenberg ate fuel like I know many days it was 80 gallons of fuel a day. And plus they had the eccentrics that had an outside oiling system, so that there was a constant flow of oil that would drip on the eccentrics in the engine room there, and that went in the bilge, and all that's pumped into Lake Superior over the years. It just, that doesn't happen anymore because everything's enclosed now, but those engines were, you had to oil those parts and they'd drip right into the lake, and out of the pump it would go.
Yeah.
And that was probably 5 gallons of that every day.
What was fuel a gallon in those days?
Well, I don't know, 79 cents a gallon, something like that.
Yeah. Right.
80 cents a gallon.
Yeah. So really, you had to work long hours to make a decent living.
Yeah, $1,000 a day really you never made a lot of money on $1,000 a day. There's a lot of expenses, and then replace those nets. Right. And there was just a lot of expenses. I think they did okay, but for me it was as a hired person, 12-hour day, that'd be $60 for me out of that 1,000.
Right.
And Dean made a little bit more. He was the son-in-law there, and they were in business together. He got a third then. That's the way it was set up.
I see.
And the boat took a third, and Morris got a third. and they paid all expenses out of that. So Morris owned the boat, so he really got 2/3. Dean got a third, and I made $60 a day. So
Then, and what made you quit?
well, that is a short story. I just had enough of it, to say the least. I could tell you a story that probably needs to be told later on, after some people die and stuff like that, and let it go for a while.
But you had put in what, 8 years?
Yeah, 7 or 8 years with in that fishing operation, and I just had it up to there. I was tired of the long days, tired of the cold hands, the sore hands. Wasn't seeing myself progressing in life.
Were you single then?
I was single then, yeah. And I decided that I'm going to try some different things. And I went into the trades. And after that, I got a job working with the state of Wisconsin. Spent 20 years there. And my last touch with this fishing was this last winter. I went back and dressed herring for Dean Halverson up in Cornucopia. Still fairly fast with the knife. About 12 boxes of herring a day in 6 hours. So I was moving right along yet. Still have a good touch for it, but brought back lots of memories being in there, I'll tell you.
I'll bet.
Yeah, cold hands and bologna sandwiches. Yeah.
But it didn't make you want to get back out and
Well,
boat.
not that lifestyle.
Yeah.
The way the guys fish nowadays, it's a much better way of fishing. Dean Halverson, for instance, runs 20 minutes outside of Cornucopia, gets 2 or 3 ton of fish, comes to the dock, has a bull gang there, to help unload the boat, to do all. We used to do that all ourselves, and on top of that, dress all the fish ourselves. Now they're in the herring shed last fall. We had 8 people helping out. We were done every day by 5 o'clock in the afternoon. The old days, we'd be there till 9, 10 o'clock at night because we did all that work. So that's nice. The guys now are into trap nets. Still a lot of hard physical work, but it's much easier than setting those pond nets and that type of thing. And so the fishing industry is it's a lot easier to work in it now than it was in the old days. Modern lifters, they have gear that pulls the twine off the boats. They have nice hoses that wash it down. We had nothing but old junk until Deanie really stepped up the pace and moved away from working with Morris. Morris was quite conservative. He believed that you could still do things the old way, and he didn't want to spend any money. And Dean said, "The heck with this! I'm going to do things differently." And he split. And Dean went on his own in about '81, and was innovative. He had vision. And he decided that he wanted to, expand and do more and do better. And in reality, he really did a nice job of setting up a fresh, new style of industry up there, which is not the back-breaking and bone-chilling experience it always was in the past. So.
And he has several boats now, doesn't he?
Yeah, he's fishing. He bought Jimmy Erickson's boat, the old Cindy Marie. He bought Jackie Vano's boat, the Jackie 2 up there, which are 2 commercial fishing boats. He bought Reuben Nelson's Ponnet boat, the big one for lifting trap nets on, and he and the boys invested in another boat they brought up from Lake Michigan. So they've got 2 trap net boats now. I think Dean has 21 traps that's available. He fishes 10 or 12 at the most. And he and his sons are in the business now. They do a wonderful job. They work hard, probably as hard as ever, but it's not as hard as ever, So his wife Maureen is very active in it. She was on the herring boat last fall, dressing fish, picking fish. She really worked hard with her dad Morris in the past, and she was born to fish too. She's a former grade school 4th grade teacher in the Ashland School District that retired, and she wanted to come home and be a part of the the boat scene. She also does the books, and the boys produce the fish, and Dean produces the fish, and now they're building a new 40 by 20 foot building in cornucopia so that they can, continue their fishery up there and have a retail sales at the dock and have more room to do the dressing of herring in the fall and whatever needs to be done up there. So they're into that end of it.
So there aren't too many left, are there, from the old?
Now Marty Erickson's kind of, he was a little bit younger than me. Marty's still has a license. He's still fishing. He's not going to be fishing pond nets this year, from my understanding. I talked with his dad, Jackie, and from what Jack indicates, he probably won't be fishing pond nets ever again. He'll retain the commercial fishing end of it and the gillnet end of it, and I believe he'll stay there. He's going to hold his license.
Bell, right?
Yeah, the Donnabelle. Yeah.
So you really were, in a way, you were there for the transition from the heyday to now the present, which is pretty diminished.
Yeah.
I mean, you really got to experience a lot of the life of a commercial fisherman that's really now disappearing.
Well, yeah, I got the neat thing is I got to experience the island life, which nobody does anymore. I saw the transition of the lake trout fishery go downhill, being back to very potent again. I've seen the evolution of the pond net to the trap net. I've seen licenses go from 50 down to 20. I've seen the tradition of the cotton mesh, the linen mesh, the cedar corks to the aluminum to the monofilament to all the new new meshes and new products that are on the market now. I've seen guys get old. I've seen young guys quit, and I've pretty much seen a lot. I'm at the cusp of both ends, from when my grandfather fished to my dad to what the future is right now. I've seen a lot of those people, so knew them all real well.
And commercial fishing has really been an important part of the Bayfield life. And of course, that's now turned to tourism. I mean, what are your thoughts on sort of the importance of commercial fishing and the importance of maintaining commercial fishery?
Well, I look at it this way. If you believe in a wise and efficient use of a resource, commercial fishing certainly is a means to an end there. They've had some problems in the past as a group of people maintaining integrity and maintaining a lifestyle within the great law of the people of this land. They've actually hurt themselves a lot because of their unwillingness to obey laws in the past. The industry right now is very clean. That IME concept of take all you can as quick as you can is not a concept that's prevalent anymore. It's gone beyond that. It's a professional industry right now, and now it needs to be opened up, I believe, to meet the demands of a society, to feed people. It needs some government input now, where maybe the Department of Natural Resources and the Department of Agriculture could sit down together and do some grants on how to market some of these sisquet or fat lake trouts that are inundating the lake. They need to be harvested and taken out of there. You're seeing a herring fishery that could go down. It's viable, very viable now, but it could go fast. Predator fish like that. The chub industry is virtually non-existent because that over the masses of those sisquets that are out there that have not been developed and marketed. They need to, the government needs to work with the industry to try and get rid of some of those fish. They still need to, the government still needs to stay active in monitoring that population of fish up there and working with the good fishermen that are out there right now to ensure that there's jobs and opportunities for people in the future too. It's gonna die, and I think that was part of the old plan of the old conservation department in later DNR, was to basically get rid of it over a period of time, because it was such a thorn in their side as far as law enforcement went, and the very few people that actually participated in that lifestyle of work. Face it, you got 4 million people in the state of Wisconsin, and 100 people really are in the industry right now. They don't have many concerns about losing that industry.
Yeah. But it's still important for Bayfield, isn't it?
Yeah, Bayfield needs it to maintain, the fresh fish in the marketplaces. There are a few families that thrive on it right now. How big a deal is it? I guess it's big to those families that are still in it. But it's gone from being very big at right around 1900 to less than 30 licenses out there right now.
Yeah. Do you think it'll totally disappear in the next generation? I mean, these kids are fishing.
Yeah, I'm thinking that you're going to see licenses go away because that's the practice that they have right now. If you let your license go, if you sell out to the state of Wisconsin, they bury that license. So in other words, if there's 20 now, there'll be 19 if you sold yours.
Mm-hmm.
Will these two young guys stay in that business? They probably will. As long as they're going to regulate the gill nets, and as long as the trap net fishery does well, and the herring fishery is viable, without doing injustices to the lake trout and salmon fisheries and the browns and rainbows and stuff like that in the lake. As long as they stay out of those areas, they're probably make it okay or very well. Other people that just can't afford the $100,000 investment in a trap net fishery are going to stay in gill nets, and they're not going to make it.
Mm-hmm.
Because of the footage they allow, because of the market. Actually, the market could take the business before any government agency could. I mean, if you're selling fish for 2 bits a pound, if you don't show a profit, it's gone.
Yeah.
So there's some other players other than just government and fishermen in this whole process.
Yeah. There's one aspect we hadn't really covered, sort of how it works, and that's ice fishing through the ice, which you did.
Yeah.
For the years too, right? Describe how that works? When does it start, and where would you go?
We went everywhere, but I'll take you to the north end of Hardwood, where Dean Halverson, his brother Frank, and I went out one day. It was 13 degrees below zero. We left Little Frog Bay at little Ernie LaPointe's place down there with 3 snowmobiles, 2 sleds with nets on them, an ice chisel, chainsaw, and we went to the north end of Hardwood where my dad gave Dean one of his favorite old winter ice fishing sets. So we got up there and it warmed up to a grand old 2 below that day. And the first thing you do is you stop along an island where we left a 100-foot running pole. These running poles were 4.5 inches wide by 16-foot pieces spliced together so they got 100 feet long. Mm-hmm. You'd hook that on the back of the toboggans as we're going, go to your spot, line that pole up in a direction that you wanted to set the nets. You take an ice chisel or a chainsaw. In this case, we chose the ice chisel just to stay warm. From there, we would go through about 2 feet of ice, chisel through it. We'd set the nets in the boxes as they were there on the ice. Dean Halverson would get an anchor line that would go to the bottom. He'd fathom the water. On the bottom of the anchor line was 2 spots where you could tie the nets. Get ready to do it that way. I'd go up to the next. I'd start walking towards the direction that we're going to set the nets. Dean and Frank would take the running pole and they insert the front end of the pole under the ice and move it along 100 feet and shove it my way. I'd go out to the other end and I'd have a line in my hand that was exactly 100 feet long, and they would look at me like this to line it up, and I'd stop right there and I'd chisel a hole.
So you couldn't see the board under the ice?
Sometimes you could in blue ice, but when you had the white ice from the snow and stuff on it, you couldn't see it. It was really an advantage if you could see it. You could stand right on top of it and find it, but you couldn't always do that. So you always had that little string rope That went 100 feet. So you get to the next hole, you would cut that out. You take that pole, and we had a hook. You could put it on the ice, and you'd push it along again another 100 feet. You'd walk up to that end of it. You cut a hole, and that pole had a line on it that was 300 feet long. Okay, so that pole would travel under the water. You'd go up to the third hole and then the fourth hole. You'd pull a pole past that. You'd stop right there. You'd untie the line off the pole, and at that point in time, Dean would be on the other end. He'd have the net set onto that line, and you'd pull that in by hand. Okay.
So you're at the far end. Pulling...
Yep. About 400 feet, 300 feet away from him in the fourth hole. Pulling it in, and then he would say stop. And then at that point in time, he'd tie his end on to the anchor line. And he'd drop that line right there. I'd hold my end up in the air, tie it to a stake, and we move the pole on again. 4 more paces. He'd move up to my spot, stop, put another anchor line in, tie both those nets to that, and then drop it. And that anchor line would go from we'd start in 72 feet of water, something like that. There'd be an anchor line down 72 feet, tied into the ice into a stick over here, so that when we came out there the next time, we could lift out of those spots. And we do this until we set 5, 6, 10 nets a day.
Ooh.
And boy, I'll tell you, at the end of the day, you know you'd done something with an ice chisel in your hand. And the sharper they were, the better. And consequently, you finish that and tie it up, set them all down the bottom, make sure everything was, the ropes are out of the way so that you didn't, when you cut out the hole, when you came to lift those nets the next time, you didn't slice them off, you didn't slice the anchor line off with your chisel. So that all had to be carefully placed, and you'd come back the next time and lift those nets. Untie them, tie a line onto the net you're going to lift, and then pull it out the hole the opposite way, pick the fish out of it, okay, set them on the ice, and then I'd come back and either dress fish, and Frank would pull the net, and Dean would pick the fish, or vice versa. Mm-hmm. Get it all on the ice, in the boxes. We'd stop there. We'd run ahead with the snowmobile, pick up the line that's on the other end of the net, and pull that net back into the hole to where it was tied up in the first spot. You do that all the way along until you lifted 7 or 8 nets a day, 10 nets a day, 15 nets a day, whatever we felt we had time for.
And then how many boxes would you end up getting generally?
Boy, in those days it was slim pickings, 200-300 pounds a day.
Which you'd haul on toboggans?
Yeah, we just put them on the back of toboggans, tie them down with bungee cords, whatever. Throw your lunch pails there. I never had a sandwich that wasn't frozen in my life out there. Coffee would be, we had those steel thermoses that only would protect that coffee until you opened them up the first time. After that, they would freeze. But ice fishing was really a lot of fun. It was you got the snowmobile, and you got all that fresh air, and you got to set nets up in there, and you got nice fish, and the best fish of the year, they taste the best in the wintertime. Mm-hmm. The whitefish, lake trout.
Because of the cold water?
Yeah, that cold water fish.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I remember one time John Defoe was fishing through the ice, and he was an Indian fisherman, and he gave me a rainbow trout that he caught, and I said, "What do you do with that?" And he says, "I don't know." I said, "I'll take that home." That was probably the best fish I've ever eaten in my life. Was a winter run rainbow trout. Wonderful fish.
And so that would last what? Start in December?
Yeah, and go through middle of April. Excuse me. We go through the middle of April. Mm-hmm. I remember we'd be out there pulling those nets in April where the ice was starting to rot. You'd leave early in the morning, so you'd be there before, right around daylight. And the ice was hard and solid, but those spring suns would come up and disintegrate that ice, and before you know it was candling. So you'd have 2 feet of ice out there, 3 feet sometimes.
Now what's candled ice?
It's just sun-saturated ice that deteriorates in quality. And you put the heat on it, rainwater on it, and sunlight on it, it wants to go back to its natural state, which is water. And one of the first things it'll do is split itself vertically like that. And it deteriorates that way. So you'll be out there in the morning and you'll start to see it candle, and then you have to do what you're doing and leave there. Mm-hmm. Go back the next morning because the candle ice now is still frozen solid. In March, this time of the year, like right now, it does that. Mm-hmm. And you just get your nets out that way, and you come back, and then you get out of there by the middle of April, and by that time, 1st of April, middle of April, by that time the boats are ready to go, and they can break through that candled ice, and up the channels they go, and then you're into the boat fishery again.
Right. So it really is a year-round affair.
Yeah, there's plenty to do all year round. Yeah. Well, same as in the old days, except the old timers. A lot of those guys didn't fish through the ice. They mended nets all winter and stuff, and they didn't leave as early as these guys do because they had wood boats, and they would not get out of here until maybe sometimes the 1st of May, 3rd week in April, whenever they could get out of here. So they never got out in March.
Yeah. Well, was there you must have had days off along the way. Was it totally dependent on weather and how the fish were running? Or you didn't work 7 days a week, did you?
We'd always try to take Sunday off. Saturdays, 6 days a week for sure. But in a crunch, if you're getting a lot of fish, you'd work Sundays. The only time you got off was in between periods of time. There could be a week in September, 2 weeks in September, and you're just working on gill nets, that type of thing. But that fishing industry, it isn't like other industries either. You never got any unemployment. There was no 401ks, and there isn't any benefit, nothing in it, just zero. I mean, it's a dead end street for anybody that wants to work in it. The only thing you'll guarantee is, like Morris Patan says, a hungry gut and cold hands, and that's all there is in it right now. That's all. It's an industry that doesn't invite people into it. It has no way to accommodate a younger person's intentions of, better the American way of life. There's not enough money as a worker to build a home, to even educate your kids in Bayfield schools. It's just not there.
Yeah.
So it serves only the purpose of a few that own the boats and stuff, and other than that, it's just a labor force that is bound not to do very well.
So when people talk about the romance of commercial fishing, pretty non-existent.
They're reading books that I haven't had my eyes on, I'm telling you. If there's anything romantic about that, there's a lure there from some people that think that, all the beauty and majesty of being on Lake Superior and violent winds and hailstorms and out there in 13 below ice days is, if that's romantic, try it.
Yeah.
The romance will soon fizzle, I'll tell you, because the harsh reality of it is it's really just hard work. Lots of blisters on the hands, and it's as hard as it gets.
So to do it, there's an economic pressure. You got to make a living, but you also have to love the lake, though. I mean, the way of life, like you said, the days when you were a kid out in the island, and I mean, it does get in your blood, though, doesn't it? Kind of like, let's say, farming or ranching, you can't make a living, but you're independent. You don't have a boss. I mean, there's certain other things that draw people to it, right?
Yeah, there are other things that could draw it to it if there was much of an industry left. That would be it. I mean, right now there will never be another island fishery because the National Park Service, has the tenureship on it, the land ship. In the old days, there were guys that stocked an island, lived out there. the lure and romance, yeah, okay. Gilmore Young also told my dad he called Stockton Island Alcatraz too. So the hired man just didn't. If that's romantic, out there 2 weeks at a time, nobody around, mosquitoes, hot sweat days, people on the reels, not greasing the reels so they could hear you work, and they could hear the creak in the wheels as the gillnet reels are being wound up. I don't know if that's romantic. Fine, that's realism right there. That's about as tough as it gets.
Yeah.
Alcatraz, that's what Stockton Island was to him. To me, Rocky Island was paradise.
Yeah.
And it all depends on what age you are, how your fortunes are lying out for yourself, where you want to be at the next stage of your life. It's a place to earn some money in between the steps that you're going to make in your life. Now, as far as a worker in the industry, if you own the boat, if you own the license, you can do very well.
Mm-hmm. Well, how do you feel about having had the experience? Are you glad you had the experience of those years you fished?
I look back as very positive. I mean, I hope anything I said doesn't sound like whining because it's not intended to be. It was just the truth. It was real hard work, and you get tired of it. It was a positive experience. It helped me later in life. I knew how it did some things for me that that a lot of people don't understand. One is that you learn how to do things you don't like to do. You can force your way through tough issues. You can learn to stick with it. You can learn to grit your teeth and get down to work, put your nose in the grindstone. All those little tricks in life are very important to the later phases you go through. It helped me a lot with my job with the state of Wisconsin. On those days that I was whining about not being very happy about my job, I went quickly back to the days of the Edmund Fitzgerald, being on the lake and us being out there in the cold hands and the 13 belows and wonderful experiences. But no complaining after that. After you've gone through that education process, I'll tell you.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, you're really one of the last Beanie's kids of your generation to have that experience. So, you'll as you get older and older, you'll be one of the last survivors of the commercial fishing age, really, probably, right?
Yeah. Yeah, and I might get back into it a little bit now too. I'll see how it goes here, but I like I say, I've run the gamut. I've seen a lot of stuff. I know the horror stories. I know the truths. I know a lot what went on in that industry. That the evolution of the industry has been very interesting. Let me tell you, from point A to point D now where we're at.
Yeah.
And hopefully it'll be around a long time because there's lots of good fish in this lake for a lot of people to enjoy and harvest that fish and have great meals and healthy food and so it's a great industry that needs to go on. There's no question about that.
No. Well, anything else, Bob, that we've not covered here that you would like to say? I haven't asked you about.
I think that'll be a wrap, I guess. I'm kind of like my dad right now. There'll be some stuff I want to tell you later, so
Right.
that'll maybe be for the version in 2030 or something.
Okay, well, thanks, Bob.
Thank you.
Mhm.